Hello, all. Uh, just wanted to give a bit of an overview for the Old Testament readings, particularly Ezra, but sort of cover both of where the readings are and where they're going and whatnot. So I grabbed this graphic. I don't know who made it. I just did a quick search, but it was a pretty good one explaining sort of the story of what's going on. So if let's see, sorry, I should have done this before, but there you go. Uh, if you look up here, you can see our first Old Testament reading is going to be pretty much all history. So all the way through next 3 years is going to be history of Israel as a nation, basically, or where it comes from, all the way from creation through Israel as a nation, I should say. So we're going to start Genesis, obviously, where it starts. You get Abraham, you get people, you get Joseph. They go into Egypt. Then you have the Exodus. It goes through Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You've got the time of the judges here. Um, Judges here after Joshua. And then eventually you end up with Saul as the first king, David as your next king, Solomon as your next king, right? So the reading we'll be doing will be right through this row of books right here, through Judges, Ruth. Then you'll go through Samuel, Chronicles, and Kings, and basically those overlap, as you can see here. First and Second Samuel overlap with First Chronicles. First Kings overlaps with Second Chronicles. So it gets a little confusing because there's no way to just read chronologically. It would be nice, but just doesn't work that way. There have been attempts from people to try and put the Bible into some chronological order, and I sort of appreciate that's kind of cool, but that's just not the way the Bible was really written. So there's no easy way to do it, right? So this overlaps a bit, but you're going to get the stories of David and Solomon as a united kingdom, right? At the end of Solomon's reign, the kingdom breaks up. So you get your northern 10 tribes of Israel. Um, Generally, the unfavored. Judah is the favored tribe. There's two tribes, technically, Benjamin. But the northern kingdom is called Israel, right? And what happens for the rest of the Bible gets very confusing because First Kings tells this story in terms of a history, right? At the same time, there are prophets, Amos and Hosea, that are prophets to Israel specifically. And Jonah is sort of from that northern tribe, but he's actually prophesying to Assyria, to Nineveh, is where he goes out, right? So, but the northern tribes meet their end when Assyria comes in and wrecks the place, right? For the most part, those 10 tribes were dispersed. They were just sent out. Most people semi consider that still dispersed, if you are like Jewish. But there's a lot of cool imagery in Acts about how Jesus pulled these tribes back together. But that's for a different topic. They were ended as a nation, northern kingdom, right? Then the southern kingdom is called Judah. It includes Jerusalem, right? And that story historically is in First Kings. But you've got a number of prophets that prophesy to Judah. So Isaiah, Micah, Joel, Habakkuk, uh, Zephaniah, and Jeremiah, right? At the same time, you've got two, same type of thing, one to Assyria, one to Edom, Nahum, and Obadiah. But that kingdom lasts a couple extra 100 years. But eventually, what happens historically is Assyria gets taken over or sort of defeated by Babylon, and then Babylon continues the process, continues on, and takes over Judah. And that is where the temple is desecrated, and they take the all the bowls and the cups and everything from the temple, and they desecrate it, and it's destroyed, right? So uh, they are in exile for 70 years. So basically, a good chunk, not all of Israel, but a good chunk of the Israelites, particularly the important ones, the nobles and kings and all of those type of people, are brought to Babylon. That story is best told in Daniel because he's a young man that gets taken from Judah, brought to Babylon, and serves in Babylon. And he actually serves for 70 years. So Ezekiel is a prophet. Esther happens in this gap, that story. But Ezekiel is a prophet, but he starts early. He actually starts before the fall, talks about it, and then goes into the exile. But Daniel actually spans this whole gap, right? So he actually serves Babylon for basically 70 years. And his last year of life is actually serving the Persian Empire. So the Persian Empire takes over the Babylonian, and he spends a year serving King Cyrus the Great. So, interestingly, this isn't mentioned in the Bible, but many people think Isaiah, 150 years before, prophesies that Cyrus is going to come and he's actually going to help restore Israel. So the tradition is that Daniel is the one that introduced him to that prophecy and said, "Hey, by the way, you're prophesied you're supposed to restore Israel." And he said, "I am? Sweet, I will." So that's sort of the story behind it. But as you start reading Ezra, you'll hear about Cyrus, and he'll say, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to rebuild Israel. I want to restart that, get it going." And he sends them back with all the stuff that was taken by Babylon, that was used. If you read in Daniel, they use that at a party, and it doesn't go well for the king. All of that type of stuff, right? But Cyrus the Great actually restores that to Israel and sends them back. And that is the story of Ezra, is actually two waves of people going back to rebuild the country. And then Nehemiah after that for a later king of Persia. Right. So all of that happens. And then you've got a couple of prophets to the sort of rebuilt Israel. But if you watch the video about Nehemiah Ezra, it doesn't quite go well. They still, even Jewish people or Israel, would consider they were still sort of exiles. It was never really like rebuilt the way that it was supposed to be rebuilt. Um, and then there is a gap here of 400 years. So in that gap, historically, what happens? So you have just in this span right here, you have Assyria comes in and takes most of that land from what was sort of more tribal. And then Babylon comes in, takes it from Assyria, and then Persia comes in and takes it from Babylon. What happens after that is Alexander the Great comes down from Greece, actually, and takes all of that land, which is why the New Testament is written in Greek. It was actually Alexander the Great coming through, brought a lot of writing and learning with him and his language as he came through. And then the Romans came in and sort of took over a good chunk of that same empire later, but they still wrote in Greek, which is why the New Testament's in Greek, is Alexander the Great. That's in this silent 400 years before we get to our New Testament readings, which is when Jesus comes. And obviously the Romans are in charge during that time. So that's sort of just a setup of what the readings are going to be. So our second set of readings, you got this first reading is all the history all the way up to right here, right? We're going to read up to this point right here as a history through all the books that are on the gray. The second set of readings will be Nehemiah and Ezra, but then we're going to strongly go into all the prophets. So we'll be reading all of these books and these books and these books and these books, and they're all going to tell you about what's going on, all the prophets that are prophesying to these countries. So time-wise, that second reading is going to be tough. We're going to be going back and forth. You're going to be jumping between different prophets that are prophesying to the different nations. So it'll be a bit tricky to follow. There is no good way to read through it and make it all be a logical, easy sort of setup because it does jump all over the place, right? So you just have to try and keep some version of this map, at least understand, that Israel moves along. They eventually have their kings, they make a nation, and then it's divided into Israel and Judah. And then they both get defeated and spend 70 years in exile. Judah does before we start in this second set of readings. So that is sort of a big overview of what we're doing. Hopefully that'll get you going and get you started. Good luck.